Alright. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Smurf Detective, where I try to figure out if someone on the ladder is being a cheeky bugger and either throwing matches to get lower so they get easier opponents, they basically get to beat up on people a couple weight classes lower than them, or if they are even hacking. Down here at the bottom right, we have the submitter of this game, Sking. Likes to go skiing, or is a Skeleton King? I don't know. Maybe play Skeleton King in Dota. Top left-hand side in the blue, this is Oof. Now, Skeleton King, let's read this. So, Smurf/hacker alert, double exclamation point. Oh my god, map hacker Protoss. And this is from Terran Lover 69 is S King's name, by the way. Hi Pig, I need your help. I'm Platinum Terran going 3k MMR. I fought this Protoss on the ladder. He always knew what I was up to. I could also tell that he was smurfing because he was always one step ahead of me. I wanted to see what your thoughts were. All right, so a Platinum player doesn't really throw any details. It's just like, this guy knew what to do, was way ahead. So first sign that he's not hacking is the probe has been queued to scout across the map, but it is queued already to go back to mining. In Platinum League, 3k MMR, that's a lot of foresight. Now, don't get me wrong, there's always details that can be way out. So of proportion with everything else. So we've got to look at the whole picture. Notice there's already probe production being halted there for a little bit. Now, unfortunately, we do actually have the control groups not working, but the control groups aren't working on the overlay currently, but we're just going to ignore that anyway, because I think control groups can be very misleading. There's very noob players who use way too many control groups, and there's very good players who use no control groups. So I think we're not even going to use that as a data point in today's show and see how we go. First things first, probes going across. Now there's two SCVs chasing, one scouting, one chasing. It's a 2-gate opening, super suboptimal Protoss build order, up against the Terran who is going a Marine into reactor but had to lift the barracks off. So a little awkward from the Terran. Also, the Terran's gone a second depot before command center, which is a big bummer, right? Because that just delays the command center and is going up against a Protoss who's gone 2-gate, and yet, like, you need a bunker down yesterday. This command center is already late, which puts it at risk. Your reactor's not that fast. Like, I already just see this being a terrible opening, because if you're going to SCV scout, see the opponent's built 2 gateways before expand, and you're not going to take any safety precautions, you're in trouble. There's no bunker started. Normally you want that started by about 225, 230 at the absolute latest against a Protoss player. There's no factory. We got second gas before even starting a factory. So Sking's opening here is kind of trash, isn't building Marines straight away, and essentially is just going to be way behind from the start. So, I mean, it's kind of common if your opponent gets ahead really early to feel like they're just better than you. But I'll tell you what, so Zuka is a Protoss content creator from France, fantastic YouTuber, and I've coached a lot of people who start off with his beginner build orders because they're big in the Protoss scene. And his kind of beginner general purpose opening for all matchups is actually this sort of 2-gate opening where you expand after 2 or 4 stalkers in the early game, and you just see if you can do a pressure with them. And the thing is, I mean, Sking saw this. It just didn't even have the most basic safety precaution. But, so this is like a disaster. Now, this is like, look at the micro on the stalkers though. This is kind of wild. The APM's really low, but this Protoss player has got pretty damn good starter stat. I mean, standing their ground there is kind of silly, but look, he's focus firing the weak units. So that's like really impressive attention to detail, but playing at a very slow pace and having a very suboptimal build order. Not to mention, you can see the probes haven't been rallied to the natural yet, is going for a forge and more gateways. So going for just unupgraded gateway units is basically completely avoiding your power spike as a Protoss. I can't imagine a high-level player would be wanting to do this. I mean, 4-gate +1, like, these aren't the units you want. You want splash damage, you want Twilight Council, and notice probes aren't building right now. So this player does seem to struggle. Even though they're doing some nice habits like always queuing workers, it feels like they've got some pieces of good preparation. I mean, they're doing a hallucinated scout. These are all some really high-level ideas, lacking the details of execution that I would expect. I honestly think if there was just a bunker at the front, which is the most standard thing for Terran, this Stalkers wouldn't have really done any damage, and we'd see the Terran in a much better position comparatively. Notice probes still aren't being pulled. There is a Twilight Council. Oh man, the hallucinated Phoenix is such a high-level move to be going for so early, right? But the rest of the build is so trash. So sees there's just a decent bunch of Marines, a factory, a star. I mean, the scouting alone tells us I don't think this player is hacking at all. Why would they bother scouting so much? So already I'm going to make a ruling. Maybe we'll revise it before the end of the video. This is not a hacker. Why would a hacker be probe scouting? Why would a hacker be making hallucinations? Doesn't really make that much sense. Also, why are they building a shield battery? They clearly saw some stuff and are like, maybe I'm going to get attacked. There's no actual attack coming at all, but their macro really sucks. They're taking 3 bases really quickly, which means they're focusing on economy. But you can see from the production tab that they are not actually focusing on economy. Everything on the screen is a whole bunch of distraction right now, but if they're not actually queuing up probes constantly, having these 2 bases doesn't do anything for them, right? Like, what's it do for you? Obviously, having 1 more mineral line is good, but they keep queuing up 2 or 3 probes at a time. And whilst they are adding a lot of tech, they're kind of getting a lot of things, they're doing this in the absence of any pressure or harassment. They're doing some good moves. Stalkers are spread around to kind of defend harassment and stuff. But realistically, I mean, if there was some sort of big bio tank push hitting at like 8 minutes, would they be ready for it? I have an inkling they won't be. I think even though charge will be done, they'll have like a handful of stalkers and zealots and like 1 random high Templar. So I think this is just one of those situations where the Protoss just got way ahead off the opening, and I don't really see them, like, they're doing a lot of things, but they're also doing it at not the best rate. They're not the most efficient. I mean, does this look like Platinum play? Yeah, to me it does. They're shifting their probes around a bit better than some Platinum players. 3k MMR. I mean, the problem here is it's so hard to read a game where someone's not under pressure. If you put someone in a position where they have to show game knowledge, where they have to react to something, if you put someone in a situation where they're dealing with a pretty scary attack and they have to do a few things correctly, you really get to see their skill level. But when one player just gets an incredible start, is miles ahead, and the other player is just sitting behind a wall doing nothing all game, they don't really get tested. And this is why it's so important to be active in StarCraft, right? So think of this as a lesson to anyone out there who thinks they're running to Smurfs all the time. It's really easy in StarCraft, if you fall behind early, to feel like the rest of the game is almost like a foregone conclusion. Like, you just feel like you're a bit behind. It doesn't feel that great. You know, you're like, oh man, this is really not fair. Like, I don't even think I have a chance in this match. So I'm kind of looking at this and going to myself, you know what? Like, let's see what happens when there's actual interaction in the game. There's a Widow Mine drop, but it's not going across. It's already minutes and minutes late. And this Protoss player built the 3rd base like 4 minutes ago, is only now getting a handful of workers on it. That just shows kind of how inefficient they are at exploding that probe production. They're also building cannons in the worst possible position. So normally I always tell people, cannons, missile turrets, you want to build them on the edges of your base so harassment can't get around the back. This area here is not bad. But why would you possibly build cannons here? That's the edge of the map. How are units going to come from there? This is Bronze League static defense placement. These cannons here don't make sense. You want to build them out front. These cannons here, they don't make any sense. And you can notice, even though sending some hallucinations every now and then, UF seems to have lost the direction in terms of what they're doing. And they have like no map control now. And they're just kind of like massing static defense at a point in the game where really, I think a much more skilled player would basically be kind of getting out on the map, taking control, looking to deny the Terran 3rd, getting some spotters. Storm is coming in with these high Templars. Let's take a look at this. I mean, this is so bizarre that someone can sit there and just not have any timing attacks they're doing. But finally, the Terran's going to go for a 3 medevac. I don't even know if I want to call that a doom drop. What is this disaster? It's 2 Widow Mines, a tank, and a handful of Marines with no... They do have stim. They haven't stimmed yet. I mean, this could do some good damage for sure. Widow Mines clear out a bunch of the probes. I mean, this is actually a great drop. This should never be a kill move because obviously it's hit so late in the game due to that bad start. But actually could kill the Nexus here. It just needs to target the Nexus and it'll go down. And Sking does. So Sking actually gets in a really good spot here. The Storm is still not done. Kills both High Templar. He's going to lose all the Marines now. A little bit slow to pick up. Does get the Archon. And tries to click on the other one. Not bad focus fire from Sking. So Sking gets some great damage with what is a very late and rather small drop, right? There could have been way more units out by then. But unfortunately, still doesn't even have 2 base production. At this point, it's like a reasonably close game, I would say. But because the Protoss can just like rebuild, hasn't really lost their infrastructure or tech, I'd say their tech's a bit better. I always worry for a Terran player, because if you're going up against Psystorm, which is now upgraded, your third's so late, your production's so late. It kind of feels like there's more chance in low level of the Terran just derping their army about. If they build enough tanks, there's totally a chance for this to happen. But let's fast forward a bit and take a look. I mean, the way that drop was handled was really bad. Didn't feel like the Protoss player was one step ahead at all. Terran's now scanning the army and saying, yeah, let's push into that, which I've got to question that. You see a stack of High Templar filled with energy, absolutely ripped. All these zealots, and you're going to move forward into that with this little army? I mean, this is gifting the Protoss a really good engagement. The tanks aren't sieged at all. Oh no, and the Protoss just A-moves. Didn't even really need that Psystorm, to be honest. Just had a better army right then and there, because the Terran production's very low, you got to keep in mind. And it just wasn't that much bio or tanks. So Terran's on 2 base. Protoss is going to take 2 more bases. Protoss is just going to out-macro after, I think, just macroing a little bit better than the Terran and getting way ahead off the opening. Honestly, I don't even know how this is supposed to be potentially a Smurf, right? The Protoss isn't at any point getting put into a position where they need to do anything other than A-move their army, and they've dropped 1 Psystorm, which wasn't even necessary to win the fight. So how is this a Smurf? Well, he's ahead, but he's ahead from the start of the game. The only real point of interaction this game, which, by the way, are you not killing... That tank just killed 3 High Templar. The only point of interaction was that drop, and that was handled terribly. That was the only time where the Protoss actually got tested, right? If there were some Liberators queuing in, some Widow Mine drops, I think we'd get to see a lot... Okay, the Protoss recall was absolute... I want to bring... Codswallop. Is that a British insult? Codswallop is absolute bullshit. That was... Okay, so the Protoss player now recalls for no reason and is adding more cannons. So definitely playing with their food. But I mean, the Terran's the one who should leave the game there, right? You should know you're lost. Getting pushed back to 1 base versus a Protoss who's probably got his half of the map by now. Ooh, why are we in this game? No wonder you feel like you're always 1 step behind. Flies the drop through the middle. Wait, hacker F you? Look at this drop path. It's right onto the base of the Protoss. He doesn't even realize there's a base. There's a base there, and the army was sitting there to defend the base, and you're going to call him a hacker? How did you submit this replay thinking this was a Smurf? Hacker F you, I'm not. You're just predictable. I mean, you just happen to have your army there. Don't act like you predicted that. Your army just happened to be standing there, mate. You can tell the Protoss' whole army is on 1k, and the storms are always coming in really late. This is not a good micro from the Protoss. It's just a move. Hacker, go to hell, and your army is soft, which is correct from Oof. I mean, let's go back and identify the key tells that tell us this is not someone who belongs above Platinum. Number 1, 86 APM. But what are the things that do make us feel like they're potentially a Smurf? I say as a knock-on. Number 1 was the Stalker micro at the start, which was really good. However, once again, if you give someone such an advantaged position where they are under no pressure, is that really that impressive? Like, if you've got 2 Stalkers and they've got 8 Marines, it's really hard to do that sort of focus fire while avoiding dying. But look at this. It's 2 Stalkers versus 1 Marine. I mean, this is the easiest thing you could ever deal with. What's impressive is you can tell that Wolf is either right-clicking or A-clicking on the Stalkers of the Marines. The Stalkers on the SCVs of the Marines here. But the thing is, I mean, you've got 2 units. A Stalker beats 2 Marines handily. You need at least 3 Marines to fight an Adept or a Stalker. Stalker, if it can just kite and micro well enough, it can beat like unlimited Marines given enough time, right? So this scenario, I mean, this here was really nice at the start of set, but then just stands his ground, loses 1 unnecessarily. But then he does focus fire a few more. Cool, could be smurfing, right? Well, no, the reason we know he's not smurfing there and what undercuts that whole argument is what's really important. Is watch from the moment the Stalkers come in, and let's stop staring at the distractions. Look at the production tab at the same time. While that whole fight's going on, or in the regular game speed, watch the production tab. There's no probes being queued up during this fight. If that player is selecting their Nexus control group, tapping to build probes, microing at the same time, that's a sign of a much higher level player. But is it impossible for a Platinum League player to do a little bit of stutter step or a little bit of focus fire in a low pressure situation where they have a vastly superior army? Not at all. If they were doing that at the same time as macroing off their control groups, that would be a sign of someone who's belongs in Diamond 2, Diamond 1, maybe even higher than that potentially, right? But that's very common in Diamond 2 to like do a little bit of macro just as you go in for an attack just afterwards. He selects it and builds 2 probes at some point, but that's kind of as he's disengaging there. And guess what? The moment he did it, another sign of an inexperienced player right here. So look at this moment, the Protoss player starts building probes, and that's the same moment where he loses stalkers. Right? An experienced player would have said, I'm going to take a second to build probes, and they would have clicked the stalker further back, selected the nexus, queued a few probes, and then microed the stalkers. This player left their stalkers in a compromised situation and was like, no, I need to build probes. Selects the nexus, builds probes, and the stalker's dead by the time they get back to microing it. This is not a fast multitasking player, and you could see it reflected in the APM tab. The Terran player is playing fast. So that's number 1. Number 2, which would maybe make us think they're a Smurf, is the fact that they took so many bases and did so many things. But just keep in mind what I said about the fact that because the Terran was behind, their attacks hit so late that they gave the Protoss time for this ridiculous greed to pay off. The Protoss went straight to 3 bases, but didn't even probe fast enough to really make that pay off quickly. So there was such a big delay before the Protoss's greedy economy really paid off, right? It was ages, not to mention charge was really late. There was no splash damage for ages. They forgot Psystorm for so long despite having High Templar out. I mean, these are all signs of a player who's not that organized. Imagine if a Liberator flew into the natural and sieged up on the mineral line. I can't imagine we'd see a quick reaction, and I can imagine they'd probably get flustered and make a ton more mistakes. But what ended up happening is because the Terran was paranoid from the start, we're building a ring of Widow Mines and missile turrets. We're building missile turrets in the back of our base. That's a Bronze League missile turret. You don't need any of these missile turrets. This is a player who's literally taken damage at the start and has put themselves further behind. So Skin, quick bit of advice for you, mate. Rather than going, friggin' hacker, how is that player so far ahead? If you have that instinct, go back, open the replay, and go, wait a second, was I 50% or what was this bloody... I'm almost at half the work account from like 5-7 minutes into this game. Was I way behind because my opening sucked and I just took tons of damage at the start? Well, if the answer is yes, then that's what you should be looking at to improve. Not to mention, if you're behind in a game, if you're taking damage, should you get super paranoid and just surround your base with Widow Mines and turrets? I mean, there's an argument for that being an okay call if you were, say, getting a quick third command center and playing mech, if you were playing a turtle style, but you're not. You're playing bio, and you're trying to attack your opponent. So you can see how you're going in 2 different directions. The moment you took damage to those stalkers, you went, oh no, I'm worried about dying. You built missile turrets and these Widow Mines, which basically just slow down your economic growth. They don't really help your attack at all. They slow down your production. We should have been beelining to 5 barracks so we could get a really sick marine tank medevac push going, which is clearly what the style you're going for. But instead, you're building missile turrets on 2 bases and letting your opponent get away with greed. We should only be building a few missile turrets and only a couple at most if we know there's Dark Templar or something like that out there. So this here is a Terran player who's done a sloppy opening, taken heaps of damage, despite knowing there was 2-gate aggression coming across the map, just because they didn't build a bunker on time, right? They just had a bunker, even with 1 Marine in it. They just built their reactor, had 3 Marines in a bunker, complete shutdown, easiest win of your life. So this, I think, is a perfect example of a Protoss player getting away with murder and the Terran player saying, surprisingly not Protoss' Imba, but you're a hacker and a cheat, which is just wild and insane and wrong. Thank you, Terran Lover, for submitting. I hope it doesn't hurt your ego too much, mate, but you just got outplayed this game. GG, well played. No Smurf detected. Thanks for watching, guys. We will catch you in the next episode of Smurf Detective. Goodbye and good night.